Hey guys, this is Mike Parker at the Center for OCD and Anxiety in Pittsburgh, PA, and this is OCD Space, where we discuss all things OCD. Now guys, what is going on lately? Everybody seems to be anxious. You're anxious, I'm anxious, your mom's anxious. Everybody seems to have an anxiety disorder. But what if the emotion you've actually been struggling with is not anxiety? That's the topic for today. Now guys, if you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe below. That really helps out our channel and helps you get more of this content in the future. Now with that out of the way, let's get started. Alright guys, let's talk about emotions because they're called anxiety disorders, but anxiety is not always the main issue that is causing problems in your life. And it's really important to recognize when it's actually a different emotional experience you're having, because if you're just looking out for anxiety and you're not ready for this other thing that is showing up and making you behave in a certain way, you're going to be stuck. And often the things that you need to move forward is being able to recognize, label, understand that other emotion that's the main issue you're struggling with. And so we're going to discuss three other heavy hitters: disgust, guilt, and shame. And all these play a big role in OCD and just, can play a big role in a lot of different mental health issues. And really for everybody, these are emotions that can control us, and we can be having them at times where it's not very helpful to us. And we have to recognize when they're showing up and understand them and know how to react and respond when those emotions show up. So starting off with disgust. Disgust is an emotion that is very, very old, right? It's in that deep part of the brain, right next to anxiety and fear. And it's one of those things that has been meant to keep us safe at a very primitive level. So anything that's like dangerous, contaminated, shouldn't be near your food, shouldn't be touched or ingested. Disgust is the feeling your body makes you feel. And disgust is not playing around. It is meant to make you extremely uncomfortable. You might get nauseous, you might get a sick feeling in general, you're going to be repulsed by something, you're going to be grossed out, and you're going to want to get away from that thing as quickly as possible. So that is a powerful, powerful emotion and can be very hard to resist and very hard to challenge. Now, the thing to understand about disgust, one, it's just as powerful as anxiety, if not more. It's not a joke to be trying to deal with a mental health issue when disgust is the emotion being triggered for you. It doesn't work exactly like anxiety, because anxiety and fear, we know that the amygdala plays a big role in deciding when we feel those emotions, and it appears to be somewhat flexible in terms of like being able to develop new fears and also eliminate fears. So we tend to acquire fears relatively easy. One bad experience, you get food poisoning at a restaurant and you might immediately have a fear of kind of going back to that same restaurant. But we also know that treatment can help, exposure therapy can help, and through going back to that restaurant repeatedly and not having anything bad happen, your body and your brain can actually get rid of that fear response. It can weaken and then disappear. And so that's how things work with anxiety and fear. But again, disgust is a completely different emotion, and it is actually situated in a different part of the brain. So there's a part of the brain called the insula, which appears to be responsible or play a big role in deciding when we feel that disgust response. And when you think about things that disgust you, I'm sure everybody will agree with this. It is not seem like something that is very amenable to change, right? So you're thinking, you're at a music festival and you're in the porta potty line. These things have been being used morning to night for 3 days, barely cleaned up. You don't know what's going on with the maintenance staff here, but the poop and the urine is piling up. there's toilet paper all over the place. You go into one of those porta potties, you're going to be completely disgusted. Now try to imagine eventually getting used to that, eventually not being disgusted by that. Probably not, right? Disgust just doesn't seem to work that way. What happens with disgust is it can become almost like permanent. But then there is definitely opportunity to challenge it, to make progress with not having as strong of a disgust response and really getting used to the thing that is making you disgusted. But the expectations you have to be much different than just a simple fear or anxiety. And so you can even think about those maintenance guys that are supposed to be cleaning out the porta potties. Where are they? I don't know. But if that's their job, they've probably gotten used to it, right? And they get a paycheck for it. So there's a motivator in there for getting used to it. And so I'm going to link down below to a blog post by Rich Gallagher, who's a clinician and a blogger. And he has created a protocol specifically for dealing with disgust-based OCD. And has some great suggestions in there. It's not heavily researched. I'll add that caveat. But Rich has researched it in his own practice, and it's informed by his own experiences as someone who has struggled and learned to manage and overcome a disgust-based OCD situation. And the thing he suggests, I'll make 2 quick points, but feel free to follow that link and read that blog post. If this is your issue, well worth reading that blog. I definitely recommend it. But he recommends, number 1, linking your treatment to a value or a goal. And so that might be a job or a certain role you're playing in life. So if you think about new parents that have to change diapers, or a vet that suddenly has to root through animal poop all day, they're not just gonna, get over animal poop just because they want to get over animal poop, right? They're going to get over it because they want to do their job. They love helping animals. This is the bad part of the job, but they're going to deal with it. And so having that larger goal, that larger reason for doing the exposure is often the motivating factor you really need. So as much as possible, trying to link your exposures to a bigger goal. The other thing he recommends is using safety behaviors or accommodations to get yourself into the situation that you're really trying to avoid. And he recommends this because disgust is just so powerful that it's often hard to just even enter into the situation you don't want to enter into. And so anything that you need to get yourself through the door, metaphorically speaking, of the porta potty and sit there is going to help you do the exposures that you need to do. And he definitely says exposure therapy works. He says, sitting in those situations over and over again for extended periods of time is going to eventually calm down that disgust response, eventually get you used to it, improve your bravery in the face of these triggers. But you might need some help getting into those situations. So anyway, those are 2 of the big points I got from his blog. But again, follow that link below to learn more about that. So guys, disgust, different than anxiety, different expectations, and much slower to change. So keep that in mind. Now let's talk about guilt and shame, because these are 2 emotions we all know. We tend to have a sense that they're 2 different things, but we can't always put that into words. And so another link I'm going to add below is to some resources from Mike Heddy, who is another great thinker in our field who's been really helping me understand these emotions. And the thing that he has recommended is the idea that the way to know the difference between guilt and shame is guilt is going to be an emotion you feel when you feel like you've wronged another person in some way. And so there's usually an other involved. That could be another person, that could be God, somebody that you feel like you've wronged or disappointed or hurt in some way through your own actions. And so you're very much going to be fixated on something you've done. And the desire you're going to have is going to be to try to fix or correct or repair that situation. You're going to be apologizing. You're going to be figuring out how to make it up to the other person, how to undo what you did. So if you're feeling those kind of desires, and that's a really good sign that guilt is actually the situation that you're in, and that's the emotion that you have to familiarize yourself with. This is not anxiety, this is guilt. And so learning to recognize what it feels like when you're feeling guilty, what the guilty feeling makes you want to do when you're feeling guilty, and welcoming that into your life, that feeling, not fighting it, so that you can properly start to recognize it, understand it, and figure out what to do when you're feeling guilty. Figure out if you agree, with the that this is a situation you should feel guilty with, right? Those things where you're going to eventually challenge the feeling, those don't happen unless you recognize the emotion and let it in. So keep an eye out for that one, guys. If guilt is your issue, that's going to bring in a whole different desire and a whole different experience for you. Lastly, let's talk about shame. And shame, you're going to know, is different from guilt, because shame is going to make you want to look inward and fix something about yourself. It's not necessarily going to be like, oh, I feel so bad that I lied to that person. It's going to be like, no, there's something wrong with me that I need to fix. And so when you're feeling that way, that is a sign that you are feeling shame. And it's a huge one, guys. Shame is such a heavy hitter. It's such a big emotion, and it's so powerful and so uncomfortable that everybody really should learn to recognize what shame feels like and what it makes you do. When you are in a really toxic relationship with shame, that's usually occurring because you're so resistant to the feeling of shame that you've tried to completely block it out of your life. And so it's become a little bit more powerful as a result of all that avoidance you've been trying to do. And oftentimes what you end up doing is responding in a very unhealthy way. You might be constantly beating yourself up, berating yourself, criticizing yourself. You might be constantly maybe getting really defensive or aggressive towards other people. You might become very avoidant of certain things that might cause shame. You might tend to withdraw from things when you're feeling shame, just shrink and shy away and get quiet. And so learning to look out for the behaviors that you do when you are feeling shame, and starting to recognize that probably means that's the emotion I'm feeling. And then what you're going to want to do is start to notice shame, start to see, what does it feel like when I'm feeling shame? And what are the things that tend to trigger this feeling in me? All right, so guys, those are the three I wanted to share today. Keep in mind, they're all powerful, they're all extremely uncomfortable, and if those are the issues going on, that is not a lesser issue than anxiety. These are just as big of an issue as anxiety and can be just as controlling. And so recognize these, guys. And overall, understanding that the ability to challenge an emotion doesn't occur unless you learn to recognize and name that emotion and really understand what it's trying to make you do. Once you can start to do that, that's when you let that emotion into your life more. Don't fight it when it happens. And that's when you can start to ask yourself, okay, this emotion is trying to give me information right now. Let me take in the information first and foremost. And then, it's a very uncomfortable way to get information, but this is how your body gives you information, right? Just discomfort. But I'm going to let this discomfort in, understand it. And then once I can do that, that's when I can start to trigger my rational mind, and I can start to say, do I agree with this emotion? When I think about what triggered this emotion, do I think I should be feeling this way because of that trigger? And that's when you can start to get your cognition back online and analyze whether this emotion is something you want to do something about or not. And that gives you that foot forward for actually challenging the emotion and pushing through it. Okay, guys, I hope this was helpful. Keeping in mind, there's a lot of other things than just anxiety at play in the human brain and the human experience. And learning all the various shades of your emotions can really, really help. And help you get unstuck in treatment, help you move forward, help you get to where you want to go. I hope this was helpful, guys. And until next time, don't forget, trust yourselves. Take care.